Hey traders, welcome back to the FXE YouTube channel. Let me start by saying last week was a horrible way to start September. I was really hoping for cleaner price action, but after more in-depth review, it was a complete mess. And to be honest, a lot of it didn't really make much sense. So today, I'll talk briefly about some key events that we can expect for next week. I'll have a look, or a quick look at some seasonal tendencies, and then do a top-down review and give some ideas of where price may go next week. Okay, let's start by having a quick look at the key events next week. So currently we have the G20 meetings going on. We have CPI on Wednesday. We have the interest rate announcement for ECB on Thursday. And then we have PPI, retail sales, and unemployment claims as well on Thursday. So the key event that we need to monitor is the ECB interest rates. So if you look here, it's forecasted to remain flat. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting interest rates to increase for EU. So if they do, it could have a huge impact on EU, not only for that day, but continue for the coming days and weeks. And aside from that, I wanted to do a quick review about seasonal tendencies as well. So I spoke about it briefly on one of my daily videos, but people tend to watch my weekend videos more than my daily ones, so I wanted to mention it here as well. So the key things to note about seasonal tendencies is, first of all, this is based on data over a 20-year span. And second of all, for September, what usually happens is we create a low and thereafter continue bullish the rest of the month. So whether that happens or not this month or not remains to be seen. But what we can say is we've created a low, and if this does play out, then EU should start rising from here. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the charts. Let's start with EU on the monthly time frame. So as I've mentioned many times now, we are bearish on the monthly time frame. We've pulled back into the breaker block, into OTE, had a huge rejection off OTE, and then you can see since then we've continued bearish on the next candle, and we're only a week and a day into September, but you can see the trend continues, and for the time being, doesn't look like it, or doesn't show any signs that it's gonna change from continuing bearish. And then if we look at DXY on the monthly time frame, it's more or less the inverse of what we're seeing on EU. So we're bullish on the monthly time frame. We've pulled back into a monthly fair value gap, mostly filled it, almost came into OTE, but we did come into discount. We rejected off that level, off the fair value gap, and the next candle was bullish, and the September candle also continues bullish. So for the time being, I'm bullish on these higher time frames on DXY, and it looks like we're approaching the buy side liquidity, or targeting the buy side liquidity, and probably come into this monthly fair value gap. Now if we go back to EU and go to the weekly time frame, so you can see the last leg has been extremely bearish. We've had some pullbacks and some wicks on a couple of the weeks, but mainly remains bearish with strong candles to the down, mostly strong candles to the downside. There is one really interesting thing that I noticed. We started to have some divergence with DXY. So if you look here, the last time we had divergence with DXY, we had a huge push up. We're currently seeing the same divergence right now. So potentially there's a possibility for us to reverse from here and start to push to the upside. Whether we continue bullish or not, that remains to be seen, because on the weekly time frame we are bullish. It's the only higher time frame that we're bullish, whereas the rest of them were bearish. So I mean, for the time being I remain bearish, but seeing this divergence on this weekly time frame gives me the feeling that maybe there is a chance for us to at least have a pullback from here. But whether we remain bullish or not, that one I'm less confident in saying. And if we do the same review on DXY on the weekly time frame, so you can see here the divergence with EU. So here we created a higher high, whereas we failed to create a lower low on EU, and then thereafter pushed to the downside. We didn't break any lows on this drive down. We actually had a pullback and then broke the lows. But like I said, we're seeing that same divergence again. So potentially we will see a pullback here. Again, whether it pushes down and continues bearish or not, that remains to be seen. But I would like to at least see a pullback at one point or another, and seeing this divergence gives some clues that maybe it could happen now. Okay, now moving on to the daily time frame on EU. So you can see we are currently bearish. We've been creating lower lows and lower highs. We've come down deep into daily demand. We tapped into a volume imbalance that was created way back in March. And you can see we've had a strong reaction off that daily volume imbalance. So it looks like on the lower time frame there are some signs that maybe we could see a bigger pullback from here. But the main thing is you can see every significant drive down that we've had. We've also had significant pullbacks into OTE or near OTE before driving further down. So it's happened here and it's happened here, but on this drive down we've created a lot of imbalances. We left behind two significant daily fair value gaps. We've had absolutely no retest of any of that. So at one point or another I would like to see a significant pullback to fill in these daily fair value gaps, as well as come into premium or OT before continuing further to the downside. Now if we look at DXY, we can see something similar on the inverse, where we're currently in a bullish leg pushing higher and higher. We've had some significant pullbacks along the way, but the current leg is driving quite high. It tapped into a daily volume imbalance again from March, and you can see we've had a significant reaction off of it. But this last leg we've left behind a lot of inefficiency, two significant daily fair value gaps, and none of that has been filled or retested. And let's just have a quick look here. Sorry, wrong drawing. So if we just draw out fibs, you can see the lower daily fair value gap comes around OT levels. So it would be nice if we start to see a pullback filling in these daily fair value gaps, and that would bring us back into OT before further driving to the upside. And as you can see on the higher time frames, it does appear that we are driving and targeting the buy side liquidity on the upside. At the same time, I showed you that we do have those divergences. Potentially this is the area where we start to see a bigger pullback to come back to create a market maker sell model and actually come down deep into this overall leg. If we just have a quick look deep into this overall leg, what would that mean? Oops. Yeah, so if we take a fib from the entire leg, that's way down here. Way down here to get back into discount, and way down here to get into OT levels. Right above the OT levels, we do have some resting liquidity. Okay, so that's a daily time frame. Let's just have a quick look at the hourly. So on the hourly time frame, going back to what I was saying about the reaction from the daily volume imbalance, so you can see we had a significant reaction off of it, somewhat of a corrective pullback back into the order block, and then after that one more significant push to the downside. It seems like it tried to drive down further but failed to, instead taking out some of the liquidity that's been built up, and thereafter correctively pulling back, creating more liquidity on the upside before one more significant drive to the downside. It took out the last low, came into the order block on this drive up, but it didn't take out any significant liquidity levels, didn't come to any draws on significant draws on liquidity, didn't come into the daily fair value gap, instead just creating more liquidity to the downside. And then the pullback was actually quite aggressive. It came back up, and you can see the resting liquidity that was created, it swept that, and you can see it's starting to react off of it the last couple hours before the market closes. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens next, because up until this point it looked like a clear market maker sell side or sell model was being created. So if we look at this, it looked like a very clear market maker sell model that was being created. The only problem is price came back and swept this liquidity level, which was a little surprising. If it was really trying to drive and push to the downside, you would have thought that the breaker would have been an area that would have held, or maybe the order block that created the low was what held, but instead it came really high, swept all the internal liquidity. So it'll be interesting to see if this is in fact the start of a market maker sell model and drive down from here, or if instead it pulls back and continues to the upside. But like I said, I would really like to see a bigger pullback to clear out some of the inefficiencies left below before we see further pushes to the upside. Now if we go to EU and look on the hourly as well, let's go to 4 hour first on EU. So on the 4-hour, you can see on this drive down, we've had the first pullback was somewhat significant into a relevant area where we had an order block that was created here before the next drive down. But the next pullback didn't really do anything other than creating a daily fair value gap. Didn't come into anything significant. Maybe we can say the breaker block over here was the area that it was reaching for before it continued further to the downside. But in this area where it's kind of consolidating right now, there's really nothing significant that price is reaching for either way, except for to the downside where it tapped into this volume imbalance. All the pullbacks were just sweeping liquidity that was previously created before pushing back down. So on the 4-hour, this last drive up really looks like a rejection candle, but if we look on the lower time frame, it looks more like signs of strength. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. You can see from this consolidation area, you can see we're starting to get some significant signs of strength where we would drive up, correctively pull back, drive up some more, correctively pull back, drive up more, but then we had a significant drop here. I believe this is news related, but thereafter immediately pushing back up, consolidating before correctively pulling back again. We had one last drive down, and then we aggressively pulled out of it, came back, retested the lower levels. You can see we have a order block here that we tested, and then after that drove up with aggressive candles, but then came back down, retest, one big aggressive push to the upside. Didn't clear anything significant other than the internal liquidity way down here, as well as coming into the 4-hour order block. There was also an hourly order block as well that it tapped into, but more or less just creating more liquidity that's resting to the upside, and above that we have that daily fair value gap. So whether this hourly fair value gap holds, you can see for the time being the bodies are held within this hourly fair value gap, and if this holds, potentially it may start driving up from here, and if it does, I would like to see the start of that market maker buy model from here, pushing up and at least coming into the daily fair value gap, but more likely coming deeper into this overall leg, into premium and preferably OTE area, before we see the next move. And the next move could be either way at this point, because we could be due for a bigger pullback. Think back to what I said about the divergence that we saw on the weekly time frame. That may be a catalyst to push up and retest a greater part of this overall range. So pull back into OTE, into this overall range, will put us way back in this area. So all the liquidity that was previously swept, it'll come back and retest. So come Monday, if we start to see price push up, then potentially we have the start of the market maker buy model. But if it comes down and displaces down, then what we'll most likely see is a pullback, mitigating somewhere in this range before driving further to the downside. But my preference is I would like to see a pullback from here, clearing the inefficiencies in this leg before further pushing to the downside or reversing and continuing further to the upside into the overall leg. So that more or less sums up the review and what I'm thinking short term and potentially long term come next week. I hope you guys found value in this video, and I'll continue to post daily updates when I have time, when the price action makes sense, and when there are potential setups. And I'll see you for the next one. Peace. Hey, you made it to the very end. Thanks for that. If you could do me one more favor and click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, it'll allow the YouTube algos to kick in and help this channel grow. Thanks again. Cheers.